Hey everyone, welcome back to the Magnetic Podcast. Super excited to have on Alex Stark today, CMO and co-founder at Ogi. Alex, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Background on how I met Alex: we met through a mutual friend that works at Meta. And as you guys know who are listening, this podcast is really exploring passionate brand communities and how they were built. And so my buddy, whose name is George, who's at Meta, recommended, hey, you got to talk to my friend Alex. They're building something incredible over there, and they've really cultivated a passionate brand community. So that's what led us here today. I'd love to kind of kick things over to you to start, Alex, with just giving us some background on what you do and what led you to where you're at today.
It was a really nonlinear path. Um, I actually was a ship's captain. I went to school to a maritime academy and drove giant, 900-foot merchant ships around the world. And I did that for a while, and then I was gone over half the year at sea, and I'd been like held hostage two different times in West Africa. And I
Wow. All right.
I
There's
decided, hey, let's start a beauty company, organic beauty company. No, that is all true, except I never thought I would start a beauty company. But my brother, he worked for a contract manufacturer in Vermont that makes a lot of products for big companies like Burt's Bees and L'Oreal. And he'd been there for a long time. So he was like kind of an expert on the beauty space and was super passionate about organic beauty and saw like a big white space in the beauty market of certified organic skincare and makeup products that are actually like clinically effective in the prestige level, as far as packaging and marketing. And my family had a friend who had he was a partner in the John Galliano fashion company when it was in Paris before it got bought by LVMH, and he helped raise investor funding and branding for that company before it sold. And so separately, I was kind of talking to both of them. I was like, I got to get out of shipping. Like, I'm gone all the time. Like, I want to start a business. Like, I was just trying to like weasel my way into like any business essentially. And the three of us came together and thought like we should start a skincare company. And with Mark's expertise on luxury branding, design, and fundraising through investors, and my brother's expertise on the skincare industries and formulation, uh, and then I was the one who was really the outsider to this, like, coming from driving deep water drill ships that are doing exploratory drilling around the world, um, in West Africa and a lot of challenging places. I came into it, and originally I was a COO doing operations and logistics and supply chain because I managed like large teams on these ships. And then it evolved over time to like originally we were hiring like we had all these outside like experts and gurus, and none of us knew like about marketing and about Facebook ads and all these things that are, incredibly important to an e-commerce business, that like we weren't doing very well with it. And I was like, man, like one of us needs to like know if these people we're hiring are good. And then I got like really deeply involved in the marketing side and learning how to do ads myself. And eventually we switched my title to CMO because we hired people that were better at the supply chain logistics stuff than me. And I really took the marketing side under my wing.
Wow, that's an awesome backstory. That's definitely the best backstory I've heard so far on this series. So as I really want to learn more about kind of this West Africa hostage story, but maybe we'll save that for another time. Let me ask you this. So as someone who doesn't necessarily have, or it doesn't sound like had a ton of marketing experience, coming from a totally different industry, what was the hardest part about stepping into a role like that at a company like OG, which was obviously growing, tremendously fast?
Well, I think the hardest part was getting like the confidence that I could do those things, and like when I first made the tradition or transition to OG, like we like from the start, like we formed in 2014 legally, and then we quit like our full time. Like I quit working on ships in the 2015. In the first year, I was like, man, what did I do? Like I don't know the beauty industry, I don't know e-commerce, I don't know anything about any of this. I've been driving giant ships like with in hostile environments. Like this is like now we're marketing to like mainly females, like luxury beauty. And at first I was like, this is a terrible decision, that I've made, and we started taking investments from family and friends, and like I put my house on the line for a commercial loan. It was a collateral. So I was like stuck. If I wasn't so trapped, thank God I was though, because now I'm like really, I love OG and I'm so interested in the beauty industry and e-commerce and everything. If I hadn't been like kind of fort or stuck in it, I probably would have left because it's so scary and challenging. Um, and I think the biggest challenge was, yeah, getting the confidence that, like, you can learn a new skill, like, you can learn many new skills, like, just because like, I never thought of myself as a marketer or, an owner of a beauty company that, like, if you just, like, devote the time and, like, don't and the persistence, you just don't give up, like, you just do whatever it takes, and when you're starting a business and your house is on the line, like, you just gotta keep going, like, there's a lot of tough times, like, that we thought, like, "Oh my god," we need more investment, like, sales aren't where we need to be, like, advertising, performing, like, you just gotta figure it out, you're on your own a lot of times, and just, like, being forced to stick with it and learn how to do new skills was, like, a challenge, but also, like, incredibly rewarding and a great life lesson that, like, it sounds, like, cheesy, but just don't give up and you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I definitely that resonates with me, for sure. I think that's been the biggest thing that I've learned is that running a business a lot of the times is you fail more than you succeed, and it's really just about not giving up. Um, as far as being successful, because like for Nifty Bridge, it was the same way. I was working two jobs. I was working at Clavio, obviously full time, and then I was also trying to start this new company as more of a passion project. And there were several times where I wasn't making really any money, and it was just draining my bank account. Like every month, I'd get a check in, and it would just leave. And so I was constantly like, why am I doing this to myself? Like I could easily go do something else. So that definitely resonates with me. I think what's really interesting about marketing, and I don't know if you agree with this, is it feels like from talking with people that have been on this podcast, from learning about it, it's such a space of constant evolution where it's not necessarily like it could be even a good thing that you came in so fresh because you were very open to learning, and marketing constantly is evolving, constantly changing. What works today might not work tomorrow. Have you found that coming in with such a fresh and open perspective has been helpful for you?
I think definitely, like, in the beginning, like, sort of you said with Nifty Bridge, like, it's incredibly uncomfortable, like, starting a business at times and scary and, like, getting through this discomfort, but it also helped because, like, you had to probably learn a lot of new things, like you
Hmm.
said, and I did too, and, like, initially, we were working with consultants that were more like old school marketers that had incredible resumes that had been marketing for a long time, but it evolved so much that a lot of the tactics weren't like what they were used to doing. And the old way that they were good at, like, wasn't what we wanted to do now. And so, yeah, I had a totally clean slate of not had no knowledge. So, I think it did benefit me because I was just like, what can we do that's going to work right now? Like, we need to generate sales and revenue and brand awareness. And like, I just had to like scour the internet and find experts to like help me and learn from people, like listen to podcasts, like find websites, take courses from people. Um, yeah, and kind of try to figure out what's working best right now. Like not what's working 2 years ago, but what is gonna like help us keep the lights on this month.
Yeah. And in kind of the same realm of, how you guys have grown, beauty is a super competitive, space. When I worked at Clavio, I constantly was coming across beauty brands every day. Really curious to understand how you guys were able to find success in such a very saturated market, and how you were able to kind of find that differentiation or create that competitive advantage.
Well, I think, like I said early on, like we came up with this idea of it is an incredible crowded space. It's crowded for a reason because it's a big it's a big market for beauty and it's expanding and margins are high. Like so usually like if it's a crowded space, there's a reason for it. Um and I think we had a really good idea to begin with that in the beauty space there's a lot of greenwashing where people are pretending to be clean or organic and they're not actually certified. And we're like, we're going to really do it. We're going to get like the highest level of organic certification and we're going to be like truly clean to set ourselves apart from these other people. And we're going to have the luxury look and feel of like the top brands. and to like combine those two, which isn't really done often. So we had like a really good competitive advantage in that area, and like our formulations expert and my brother and resources there helped us. Um, but I think what really set us apart is when we started to like build out like a total network of OG super fans, like at one point I saw like, okay, like in ads, what really works well is influencer creatives. And everyone says that, like UGC. And we saw that. Like we had people that just worked for us. Like in the beginning, we try to make these like high budget films for ads. You spend all this time and then it wouldn't work. And we're like, oh my God, like this took forever and all this money. And then I had a friend who taught me a lot about ads. And he said, just film someone on your iPhone right now, putting on this lip tint and talking about OG. And that was like by far the best performing ad we've
Mm.
ever had. And that was like a total game changer once we saw that. Actually, like you hear people say it, but we like tried it and we're like, oh my God, that's like better than anything we could make hi-fi. And so then we saw like, we started having friends and family make videos for us. And then I was like, we really need to like get like people throughout the US of different ages, looks, whatever, vibes, and to but we saw it takes a lot of work to find like lots of people to talk about your brand. So like we made the leap of faith of hiring. I had a friend who I knew was like just a real like hustler, and she wasn't an expert on influencers or anything, but to just start reaching out to tons of like micro or macro influencers, like not with big followings, small followings, but get content rights to run their ads. And that was a total game changer when we did that. Like when you really have to do it. Like we went all in on it, and now we have 4 full-time people that just work in our influencer program. We're adding a couple more in the next few months, and like it was a huge spider web effect. Like people started seeing all these influencers post about us organically, so then more like small and big and medium influencers wanted to work with us. It gave us an unlimited amount of content for ads, so then we were able to scale our ad budget like incredibly aggressively. Um, which then more influencers saw it and wanted to work with us. So it just like one thing fed the other. And that was like a huge unlocking moment to get our brand across. And like even I said at the beginning of this podcast with the name pronunciation, like earlier this year, Halle Berry said, this is like my favorite makeup product. Like we didn't give her the product. Like she found us on her own, probably through this spider web effect. And like I've read about this before that it's like a lot of times people see like, oh, this one celebrity post about OG and they're like, oh, that person made the brand. But really it's not. It's like the thousand, people with less followings that created the spider web that allowed that huge, famous person to find the brand. And so we like really created this spider web of like OG super fans around the country.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because I think I've fallen into that where I see some sort of influencer or athlete promoting a product, and my immediate reaction, as I'm sure everybody's is they're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. So I might not necessarily like think, oh, okay, like they actually believe in the product. And I also think there's probably a ton of brands that are listening to this that just think that that's unattainable, like getting to that level of celebrity. But it sounds like what you're saying is you actually never got to her. It was you created a network of people who love what you do, and you kind of built that spider web. And eventually, right, a big fly comes along, and next thing you know, they're using OG products.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like probably some of what you're doing with Nifty Bridge, you're doing these interviews and you're doing different things that aren't directly promoting Nifty Bridge, but it's going to create the spider web effect where then brands start using it, talking about it, and all like it's not always like directly linear of how it builds your business, but that's what happened. And it's funny because early on we're like, we need a huge celebrity, we need a huge influencer. And I tried to negotiate with them, and like once you start negotiating with agents, it's crazy, and it's
Hmm.
like when you're a small brand, like you can't afford those deals usually. And we also had spent some money with like some people that were, fairly famous or bigger influencers. We didn't see a return on investment. So it's an incredibly big risk. Um, and that this was a great way to go about it. And it's like the good thing for businesses starting out is like anybody can do this. Like it doesn't matter how small the influencer is, just look for people that make good content and like they're following you think is relevant to your brand, like that are like it doesn't have to be beauty. Like it's actually bad a lot of times to go after someone directly in your category because they're so saturated with
Mm.
beauty brands. But like people that have natural lifestyles, yoga, like those interests, like find people that are like an adjacent interest and seed them with products. And like it's incredible because anybody can do it. And like a lot of business, it's like that persistence and like kind of hustling. And I hate using the word like hustling and grinding because it's so overused, I think, in e-commerce. But it's just like it just takes effort and continuous effort. Like every month, sending out like now we send out like close to like 750 products to 750 different people every month of influencers of from a couple hundred followers to hundreds of thousands. And it's just like consistency and just like anybody can do it. It's the great news. It just takes effort.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking, if you showed a business owner, the person they want to reach. So for Nifty Bridge, right, that's, a massive company that has a passionate brand community. And you said, hey, it's going to cost you $100,000, but we're going to get you this customer. Or if you showed me maybe a person, because they always say you're 3 steps away or something from anybody in the world. Maybe it's 4. I don't know what it is. But if you showed me a person that's 1 step away from them and said, hey, it's going to cost you $1 to get in front of them, I could, you could sort of surround all these people without even knowing it, just by exactly what you're talking about. It's where can you go where people will love what you do, and in a way, right? You're one touch away from maybe that big person that you're trying to land, and that oftentimes is a much easier way to get in front of them than to go directly to them with some sort of big offer.
Yeah, 100%. It's like 100% that way. And then it's like this network effect. And then they see you, you get that essentially you're getting in front of them for like a less amount of money or a cheaper amount. And then they see one of your Facebook ads and your ads start working better because of that. Or recently we've gotten into some big retailers in like wholesale and physical stores around the country. And when I've gone in and visited the stores, I'm like, "Hey, how's OG doing? Like, do customers come in and know about OG?" And they're like, "Yeah, you guys are like viral on social media. Everyone comes in. They're like, I see that brand everywhere." And it's because of like that. Cause yeah, we're like showing to all people, we're not just restricting it to like these beauty followers that are really expensive to reach.
Hmm.
And so like any business, you just have to like just like I said, just find people that make good content and like their followers are in a interest that relates somehow to what you're doing.
Yeah, so I've heard you mention scrappy and gritty quite a few times. So I want to ask you a question around, if you think back to the early days of OG when you joined, um, can you think of like one specific instance where, or the scrappiest or grittiest thing that you guys did in order to find some initial traction or some initial success? And then the second part of that is, what were the results of whatever that kind of initiative was?
Yeah, I think it's like we probably tried a lot of things. I think a part of that is just trying a lot of things and trying a lot of these sound like, business cliches, like try and fail fast. But a lot of them are true, like because you can hear like people on the internet and all these gurus and say these things and like you can try them and they're like, this is if you do this, you'll have 100% success. And like most of the time they don't work out. So like the key is I think trying things quickly and trying them yourselves and not just listening to others. Um and getting them off the ground in like the easiest, lowest cost way. And then if they do work to like perfect it. Um, I think one of the like I already used that example, but having someone who worked for us to like unlock in our brains like what UGC is and how easy it is to do. It's like I just take my phone out and film you, and then you can replicate that, thousands of times over was definitely one of them. Um, we've done some very scrappy things along the way, like to because we're investor funded, we're like VC backed at this point. And a lot of times I think people hear that and like, oh, this company's got tons of money, but like we're doing really well now. Our sales are huge, we're approaching it to be like we're close to being a 9-figure revenue per year brand. And but before, like we had some times like, with COVID and different things where we had to be like very scrappy with financing, and take some of these like deals from it used to be Clearbank and then Clearco now and Shopify Capital and these different funding options to keep the business going. And I think like if you believe in your business, it's like you have to like gamble on it sometimes and like do what it takes to keep things going so you can try that next thing that gets you that like big success that all of a sudden your ads start working, 10% better because all these influencers are talking about you. Like we had to do some interesting things with funding along the way to keep things, the engine turning here.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that as somebody who bootstrapped Nifty Bridge initially. What it was like to be, making good money but constantly being poor is how that's how I felt.
Yeah.
So people would always be like, "Hey, why are you coming to this thing or going to this? Like, I know what job you have," and I was always just like, you have no idea how much engineers are. I mean, it's like the guys that I'm hiring sometimes making more money than I do. So that was always a challenge, was seeing like how easy, I guess, things could be if I just kind of gave up. Because there always is an alternative option to starting a business. Whatever it is, it sounded like you have a background in a variety of different things that I'm sure you could have went back to and made decent money and had a decent living. But I think like one of the things you learn, as I'm sure you've learned, is you start to fall in love with that process of like almost falling over, almost tripping, almost ending it, and then continuing to go. And then eventually you're just kind of like into that process, and it becomes so much more rewarding as you hit these different milestones because you know that the alternative was just so much easier. So at least for me, I think that's been the super rewarding part, is the process. And I feel like we're hitting on a ton of cliches with that, but I think that that's just the genuine truth of it, is you have to learn to really enjoy just the ups and the roller coaster ride that you're on.
Yeah, for sure. Like you saw, I think it's the same for any business owner. Like, uh, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's uncomfortable, frankly. Like, but you do get more used to it. Like there's a lot of times with funding where like, oh my God, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna pay these invoices? How are we gonna do this? And like in the beginning, I was like, really panicked. But after a while, like the more you like flex like the uncomfortable muscle, the more confident and comfortable you get
Mm,
in uncomfortable situations. Like you're like, we did it before. Like, I don't know exactly how we're gonna do it, but we're just gonna keep pushing and we will do it. And just like have that mindset that like no matter what, we can make it work. And what also helps is like being like, and if it doesn't, what's the worst case scenario? Like you said, like you have an incredible background. Like I had this background where I could go back to this thing, like you will be okay essentially if it all fails. And also like if everything went wrong, like I think you're probably getting with Nifty Bridge is like you get this incredible like MBA, like better than an MBA experience, like with all these things to start a business that then if for some reason this one doesn't work out, like the next one you'll have all
mm.
this incredible experience, like or like to start a new business or for people to pay you to be a consultant because you've learned all these things like um with your own money and like blood sweat and tears to do it. So yeah, it's I kind of forgot what the question was there, but
No, no, it was just generally kind of talking about, I think last thing on this that I think is really interesting is when you stop looking at yourself or your business on sort of a lot. I think a lot of the times as a business owner, as someone who works, for a company, you look at your career, you look at your business on a graph, and you try to graph that trajectory where there's some end goal and you're always measuring yourself to that. And I think one of the really interesting things that I've learned about running a business is if you, instead of looking at the entire graph, just zoom in on that point in time that you're at now and take a look at like the slope of your line. So you might be in the negative, as far as the life graph goes. But if you zoom in and you see, oh, well, actually, I've learned a ton. I've failed constantly, but I'm sharp as ever. I have all this, like you said, I've got sort of the MBA because I've gone through this business. And you notice that your line looks like this. Eventually, right, you'll end up where you want to be. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned, is just zoom in a little bit. Stop trying to think about, hey, the grander picture and where it all ends up. Like if you just focus on, hey, the things you can control, the skill sets you can learn, eventually, right, that line is going to go, up and to the right.
definitely 100%. And that's like I think just in life in general, a good way to it's hard to do it because at least my brain always wants to focus on like what's the end goal,
Hmm.
and, like, trying to get to that end goal, but, like, every day we have, like, even on a day that's, like, a bad day, like, there's probably some successes, and I think it's, like, like, gratitude is important in the process of a business because it's, like, challenging a lot. It's, like, scary, challenging, like you said with Nifty Bridge, there's, like, things cost a lot more than you expect, like, things take way longer than you expect. You try a lot of things that you thought would work that don't work, and, like, to, like, celebrate the small wins because when you zoom in, there is a lot of small wins,
Mhm.
and when you zoom out, you're still going to the right, up and to the right, even if it feels like, you're in this, like, ads aren't working well this month or something. And so it's, like, really important to, like, try to be grateful for the little things and celebrate the small wins. And I think especially with the team, like, if you have, I'm not sure how many people you have working with you at Nifty Bridge, but, like, as your team gets bigger, or any size team, like, celebrate the small wins with them. And, I'm probably not the best at this either because I'm like, okay, we did this. Now let's focus on this and instantly moving on to the next thing. And I think somewhat that drive is required for entrepreneurs where you're, like, always thinking of the next thing, which probably drives us to success, but it also makes it hard to celebrate the success when you're in it. Um, and to stay, like, yeah, to try to, like, and honestly, I do try to, like, I try to, like, think of things I'm grateful for each day, and I'm not very good at consistently doing that. And I try to meditate every day, which sounds very, like, cliche, like guru, but honestly, it helps me because, like keeping a calmer mind, like, helps me make, like, rational decision and to be able to zoom in and say, like, oh, actually today's not that bad. Like, we did these things that were really great today, or this week isn't that bad. Um, like, I feel like having gratitude and, like, just meditating for a few minutes a day, like, um, helps me be able to, like, right size things. And, like, our reality is, like, basically based on our perspective. Like, I could see the same thing today and think it's bad, and I can see this same thing tomorrow and think it's good. It's all, like, kind of what I make of it. So, uh, doing things to help your mindset as an entrepreneur is super important, I think, to, like, so you can, like, stay positive and like, live in the kind of wins.
Yeah, and especially when your brand is, all about health and wellness, and sustainable, obviously with cosmetics. So I'm sure there's a part of you too with OG's culture that is rooted in taking care of yourself.
Definitely. Yeah. Like, we, encourage our team, and, like, even when things are busy, like, we want to make sure everybody's, like, work life balance is good, and, like, encouraging people to do things for themselves that, like, help with that. It's, like, it's incredibly important because I think, and I said the word grind, which I hate saying, but, like, there is a lot of hard work to do a business for the owners and the employees for a startup business. And, like, I'm sure I'm sure you see it with Nifty Bridge, and I'm sure everybody sees it, and I think it's really important. Like, you can't work as effectively, and, like, we also wanna live good lives while we're doing it, like, um, if you're, like, not taking care of yourself. And I think that is really important. I think people that are just, like, working all the time and not doing things that help with their, mental health and their physical health, which then also helps with your mental health, I think you're not gonna be able to work as effectively, and you might just be wasting a lot of time just trying to, like, grind it out if you're not, like, taking care of yourself and making sure your team members are taking care of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get back into a little bit of talking about your approach. We talked about sort of the spider web approach to your influencer strategy and creating community. I wanted to ask you, like, how do you think about sort of staying on top of trends and ads when constantly things are changing? So what's working today might not work tomorrow. Like, how are you guys constantly making sure that you're staying ahead of those trends?
Yeah, so I've tried to go to a lot of events. Like, you worked at Klaviyo. If Klaviyo is an important partner for us, or email in general, obviously email marketing and SMS marketing, and to try to go to a lot of in-person events when I can, because a lot of times whoever's hosting it, like, say Klaviyo, for example, like, what they present at the event might not be that impactful for me. It's, like, something I may have seen, but the people you meet and you, like, network with at those events, then I like stay in touch with them, and a lot of them become like my friends. Like you become friends with George, who I work at Meta, who's been a great supporter. Just on the side, a side note there. And so you go to these events for maybe email marketing, and then it leads to like meeting this other person who owns a beauty company or a big e-commerce company. And then you like share things like, hey, ads aren't working well right now. Anything like working with you? And like it also helps when things are tough to like have each other like listen to like friends in the industry and to keep each other updated on what is working. And you meet these like people that are in this like circle of trust somewhat. Um, so that's been incredibly important, is like networking in the industry, which like I think we were saying before the call, like I'm not like incredibly extroverted. And so it takes like effort and energy, but it's like being in some like mastermind groups, I never thought I'd be someone who's in like these mastermind groups, but they do make a like I met some really good friends for one thing in these different groups or conferences I go to. And it's taught me like so much about like newest things that are working and what to try, and also to help if you meet some trusted people, because there's so much noise. Like if you go on Twitter and you're following a bunch of marketers, like there's all these people that are gurus that are like, you got to do this with your ads and this is going to work. And like a lot of them are just trying to get followers or, likes or comments on their tweet or post. Um, and to try to find like some people you can really trust that are like smart people and that can support you, and give you like, and you can share ideas and wins with each other. That's been super, super helpful. And I think it doesn't really matter if they're in the same like vertical, like you and I like could probably share a lot of things that, even though you're essentially like more of a software company, right? Like that would work well for you and vice versa, like we don't have to be even both e-commerce. We're just like in the general arena of e-commerce. Like you can share a lot of knowledge with each other that is like that we've spent a lot of money to learn, like this degree in marketing that I've essentially paid for, like it's cost us a lot of money, like just by trial and error. And so you can share that wealth with others and they can share their wealth of knowledge with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I feel like working at HubSpot and Klaviyo, which service a little bit slightly different customers. So I worked a lot with e-commerce brands, and then I worked a lot with more B2B brands. It is very interesting to me how these two industries, B2B and B2C, especially in software, how much they kind of will follow each other in different trends. So B2B marketing nowadays looks a lot like B2C, except now you're personalizing it at scale. So B2B traditionally was one to one communication, calling them up on the phone, hitting them up on LinkedIn. Nowadays, right, it's how do I take that kind of personalization and bring it into a B2C model? So I think that's really interesting. And I totally agree with you that surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And it doesn't necessarily matter if they're in different industries, because a lot of the times that's that missing piece that you needed, that unique perspective that you can bring back to your business and say, hey, we're not a software company, but we need to start building a program or a membership that kind of emulates that software as a service style. There's different things that you can pull from, I think, from different businesses.
Yeah, 100%. Like you help build VIP customer bases and like incentivize the most loyal customers to buy more, and like you probably have a ton of statistics on that you could tell us about why it's so important and how we can improve. Like we do have a loyalty program, but like how we know it's incredibly impactful, like how we could improve that more. And yeah, it's just like there's so much crossover like with all these things. And even I was gonna say with like B2C, now you see like, like I said, how much influencer ads and UGC ads work for us. Like I get targeted with so many B2C ads that look very similar to B to
Hmm.
or I get targeted with so many B2B ads that look very similar to B2C. And there's like a ton of influencers now in the B2B space that I follow that promote softwares where it's hard to know a lot of times, like, are these guys just like influencers for this software or do they actually think this is a good software?
Yeah.
So there's so much crossover with all of it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So, what is it like from looking at the social media side? Because I think you guys have really excelled in that area, taking a social media platform from, zero from scratch to, 200,000 people.
Like organic social media, essentially?
Yeah.
Well, that kinda goes back to that spider web effect, honestly, that's been the biggest builder of our organic social media platforms, and, um, like, trying to build out loyal fans, like, as cheaply, essentially, and, like, as far-reaching as possible, um, and then consistency, like, when we had very little followers and stuff to keep posting even though it feels like no one's looking at it, like, it just, like, builds like, when you I don't know, for us at least, like, nothing happens as fast as we thought it was, we thought we'd start a business and the next day be, like, in every store in the country and be, like, a household name, and it took us, like, a year, 2 years longer to even launch our first product than we thought, and to just keep posting even if you think people aren't watching and be real, I think, like, you need to obtain like, keep your brand image up, but brands have to have a personality too, and to try not just to, like I think we fell in this trap a little in the beginning, like, "Oh, we see this brand posting like this." Like, your brand needs, like, a soul and personality, and to try not to let that fall off, like, because you see some other social media account doing, something a certain way, where you can learn good things from them, but, like, stay true to your path and what you wanna do with your brand, and I think that will keep people engaged a lot more because people can feel realness, like George, our mutual friend, like, I like George a lot, he's been an incredible account manager, but I also like him as a friend because he's, like, just an authentic person, and, like, the older I get, the more I value authentic people and
Mhm.
authentic conversations, and I think it's similar with social media, like, people can see through it if your account is just, like, so, like, surface level and has no soul and authenticity to it.
Yeah, I that resonates with everything that we've built at Nifty Bridges, stemming from the fact that brands are having a hard time building authentic connection. Um, Not everybody is able to have these events. I think on this podcast, we've heard a lot about, different ways that you can create that authentic connection. And it's hard to do that digitally. It's very difficult because so much of today you don't even know if it's real, right? With AI now pushing out content, creating content, influencers that are getting paid to push content. So, like, as a consumer, it can be really challenging to separate what's authentic, what's real. Is that voice? Yes, it sounds very interesting and new, but is it actually real? Do they actually believe that? And that can be super challenging for brands that we work with, um, to create that connection, to create that spider web. And so I think, like, one of the things maybe I'd love to ask you about is when you think about building that spider web, building that community, outside of being authentic, is there anything else that you've really prioritized, in your customer engagement, or the interactions with your customers that have helped foster that, community and connection?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is something that has been a big game changer for a business. Like, a lot of things you hear, when you're starting business that seem, like, really obvious, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, we do that," but then once you start doing it much better, you're like, "Actually, we weren't doing that well, or we weren't doing it at all before." And, like, kinda like with our like, we want all of our customers to, obviously love our brand and buy from us and then be supporters of OG where they create a spider web. I mean, they're influencers themselves. Anybody with, like, one friend can be an influencer, like, digitally or in real life. Um, we started really listening to our customers.
Mm.
Like, one thing we started having all these influencers from that program, and our best selling products are these 3 certified organic face sticks. It's like a contouring kit, and a lot of them are using brushes from other brands, and people would say on the ads, like, "Where did they get that brush?" And I kept seeing that comment, and there were just, like, all different brands brushes, and at first I was like, "Stop asking about other brands brushes in our ads, like, focus on me here." And, and then I was like, "Wait, we need a brush, We just need to make our own brush." And so we made this, like, incredibly nice, vegan fiber brush. It's, like, a super great brush, and that was a game changer for us. Like, that, like, we were not profitable until that moment, and then once we did that, we thought, like, 10% of people were gonna buy this brush with our best-selling contour kit that we spend, like, an obscene amount of money on ads for every month, and it was such a game changer that we thought 10% of people would buy it with the kit, like 60% of people started buying it. We bought like an 8-month supply of the brushes. We sold out in like 2 or 3 weeks. It was nuts, and it instantly was a game changer. Um, and that we got that by like listening to our customers. So now like we're like whenever we see we like work really closely with our customer support team, and we have them every week like tell us like the top things they're hearing in ad comments or through email or chat with customers, and try to like bring that into like our product development and marketing tactics, and like to really like to really just listen to other people, like to listen to your community of people, to listen to whether it's influencers, customers, like to not just like brush it off and think like, oh, this is my brand, I know better. Like, no, listen to the people that are buying your product. It sounds obvious, but like it kind of took us a while to get to that point where we really listen.
Yeah, as a consumer of products online, I can resonate with this a ton because I'm actually remembering a story. I don't know if you know of Cuts Clothing. They make
Yeah.
really nice like t-shirts, and I got to know them early on at Klaviyo. We'd worked with them, and so I got to kind of see their brand, really early stages, and I tried out some of their stuff and I loved it, but they had very limited SKUs back then. And so I remember reaching out because there was no way for me to, because I commented on their Instagram, like, hey, can you guys make a long sleeve Henley? As weird as that sounds, I just really wanted a long sleeve Henley, and no success there. So I reached out to the CEO or one of the co-founders on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey man, big fan of what you guys do. Would love to see a long sleeve Henley. Um, I think he replied and was like, appreciate the feedback. But actually, 2 weeks later, now granted, this probably was not for me because it was so quick, but they came out with a long sleeve Henley. And even though I know I didn't make that happen, there was a sense of like, yeah, like I'm on the ride with this company. Like they
You're
get
a
me.
part of it.
That
Yeah.
you're a part of it. And so like when I started Nifty Bridge, I really wanted to harness that idea. And I think a lot of it stemmed from ownership. Like as soon as they took my feedback, I felt like, hey, I have a little bit of a stake in this company. Like, oh, I helped build that. Even though technically it's probably in my own head, there is that sense of like building it together with your fans and with your community. And that can sort of be that tether to me to Cuts. So now I'm a super supporter of Cuts, because I feel like I've gone along for the ride, watched them grow. And so with Nifty Bridge, we call them ownership programs because what we really try to do is make them feel more empowerment in the brand and the future of that brand.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, honestly, I'm not just saying this because we're on a podcast together, but we're gonna look at Nifty Bridge after this because it is like if you can make like that exact story, like if you can make people feel a part of the brand, that's what we try to do with our influencer community. Like we listen to them and um, ask them, like, what do you think of this? What do you think we should launch next? And we have a post purchase survey where we say, like, what do you think we should launch next? Or
Hmm.
what color should we do next? And we really want to like prioritize the voice of our best customers above all else, because they're
Yep.
the like biggest supporters of us. And so like what Nifty Bridge is doing, and we have a loyalty program, but we're always trying to improve that. Um, seems to fit exactly with that because people like sort of like Kickstarter, where people get the crowdfunding. And a lot of times that propels brands to success just because they have so many supporters that feel like they're a part of this company because they put in like $5 or whatever, and that's similar to customers buying your product.
Hmm.
Like if you can make them feel a part of it, then like they're a lot more incentivized to like help you. And so um I love what you're doing at Nifty Bridge. And I think we are interested in exploring more because it's crucial to like foster and build that relationship out more to like have them a part of the team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm almost reminded of like when I was a kid, my parents would say, clean your room. The second they said, hey, there's something in it for you, whether it's like, hey, you won't get your allowance or hey, we'll get ice cream, right? Then you now take pride in your room. I feel like there's always like any way as a brand that you can create that sort of like buy in from someone of like, hey, I'm on this journey for a reason or I'm on this journey, together. That's oftentimes looked like points. And I think one of the things I've realized is you don't want to make the mistake of getting loyalty to points and not loyalty to brand. But definitely like that resonates with me as well. I know we're coming up on time and I want to be respectful of the hour mark for you, Alex. But I do want to ask you, we always like to have at the end of the podcast One of the biggest things for podcasts for me personally is, I always like to have something that I can take away and use. So I guess my question for you is, for the marketers, founders out there that are building, trying to get scrappy and market their product, like what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, well, I guess a couple things. Well, one more like cliche kind of thing is I heard, I think it was Mark Cuban who said it, or somebody said it, that is famous, that every overnight success took 10 years to build. Like you see something like sort of like with the celebrity thing I mentioned before, like you're like, oh my God, that company's so successful, but you don't see what went into it. Like, you grinding it out with Nifty Bridge or with OG, like, um, and to just keep persevering, like eventually all of a sudden you'd be like, whoa, we're like, almost a 9-figure brand. Like, how did that happen? To just keep being persistent. And I think a takeaway, I'm not sure how tactically you want it, but with, I think ads specifically, I'll go into ads. Something that's helped us a lot is relying a lot more like with, Meta is definitely our number one advertising platform, like, um, because it works the best. Like nothing else comes close to it for new customer acquisition. So I would tell anyone, smaller brands are, we're spending millions a month on ads on Meta, and um, we're doing that because it works so much better than other platforms. I would say unless you're pretty large, to like focus your ad spend on Meta if you want to acquire new customers and build out your brand, and to trust the machine a lot more. Like we really, earlier days, like we did all these crazy things with targeting and stuff to try to, like hack the system and beat Facebook. But like we're finding with Meta, we do some advertising, TikTok in general, like the algorithm and machine learning is much smarter than us. And to like do broad targeting, supply the machine with creative diversification, and let the machine like find your customers that they'll do better than we can as humans essentially at this point. So trust machine learning, I guess, and focus your advertising on Meta. Like even if people are saying TikTok is like the new thing for advertising, like for us and for a lot of the brands I know, like Meta is still like they're like leaps and bounds ahead of the competition for e-commerce brands.
That's great. I know George will be extremely
Or
happy.
do that.
George will be sharing that snippet on his LinkedIn, 100%. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Alex. Super, just honestly, like really enjoyed this conversation. I didn't expect it to necessarily go to some of the places that we got to talk about. I actually think we're super similar in terms of our background as well. So excited to chat more, explore more, but really appreciate you jumping on here. Thank you, George, if you're listening, for making the connect. And yeah, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jared. I really appreciate it as well. And yeah, shout out to George. Shout out to Meta. Give us some ad credits. Thank you. All
Yeah,
right.
that's great.